Watching Donald Trump host European leaders and Volodymyr Zelenskyy is just like pulling teeth. Trump completely out of his depth because they are all so much smarter than he is. They all know of his deep insecurity, they all know of his desire to be a dictator, and so they're having to play this game of congratulating him and loving on him, and the whole thing is just a political theatre to one end, which is to end the war in Ukraine, instigated by Russia. But they know that Trump is more of a fan of Vladimir Putin than he is of Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and so they're having to manipulate him slowly. It's like trying to walk through treacle, seeing world leaders have to leave their brains in the foyer as they deal with Donald Trump. Half the time he's not really listening. He just likes to facilitate it like he's hosting a special episode of The Apprentice.
For all of the wonderful things that took place today, we've had a very successful day thus far. Important discussions as we work to end the killing and stop the war in Ukraine. We're all working for the same goal, very simple goal. We want to stop the killing, get this settled. I've just had the honor of being with President Zelenskyy and all of the discussions that we've had. We covered a lot of territory.
And when he calls on a certain leader, he then likes to give them a little description, like people don't know who Friedrich Merz is. I mean, Merz actually cut him off. Trump's was like, and now Chancellor of Germany, very strong and powerful, and Merz was just interrupted him and just carried on talking. It was rather brilliant.
Mr. Chancellor from Germany, a very great leader.
Mr. President, dear Donald, many thanks for having us today. I think this is extremely helpful that we are meeting and hearing that the two of you are having such a good meeting today here in Washington. The next steps ahead are the more complicated ones now. The path is open. You opened it last Friday. But now the way is open for complicated negotiations. And to be honest, we all would like to see a ceasefire, the latest from the next meeting on. I can't imagine that the next meeting would take place without a ceasefire. So let's work on that, and let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire.
The Germans have no time for all of this theatre. They just want to get to an end of it. Now, Donald Trump doesn't care for the people of Ukraine or necessarily the Russian people either. I mean, Donald Trump cares only for himself. And so whenever he defaults to saying, we just have to stop the killing, we've got to stop the killing, what he's actually meaning is, I have to get a Nobel Peace Prize. I just have to get nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. That's the only thing on his mind here. Fortunately, the leaders of Europe recognize this, and so they are playing him in this kind of exhaustive game of chicken, where they marinate him in kindness and sweet talk and put him on a pedestal. Oh, it's so wonderful that you're hosting this, and if it wasn't for you, then no progress would have been made. And of course, this is ridiculous. Donald Trump hasn't done anything. The only thing he's done is pose for a photo op with his best friend Vladimir Putin and invite him to ride in his limousine, which was never on the cards, complete break with protocol and security. And Putin so far has got everything that he wanted from the very beginning of this war over 3 years ago.
I think you'll see that President Putin really would like to do something else. I think when we set that up, when we do, I think it's going to be when, not if. I think you're going to see some really positive moves. I know there's over 1,000 prisoners, and I know they're going to release them. Maybe they're going to release them very soon, like immediately, which I think is great.
Putin has not changed his demands. He is simply doubling down in his desire to reconstruct the Soviet Union. And he's starting with Ukraine, but undoubtedly he'll go for Poland next. And he knows that Donald Trump is dumb enough to allow that to happen. Remember, Trump hosted a wanted and indicted war criminal in Vladimir Putin. Somebody who is responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of people, not to mention the deaths of people in his own orbit too. And Trump rolled out the red carpet for him on American soil. I mean, this is unprecedented. And it was done because Donald Trump cares nothing for protocol. He doesn't understand the history. And he just wants to be friends with dictators. And because he did that, now the Europeans had to show up at the White House to support Volodymyr Zelenskyy because Putin had Trump right where he wanted him just 48 hours ago. You know, the Europeans, they don't want to be coming to the White House and doing this. They've got better things to do. But they know that if they allow Zelenskyy to go back into the White House after Putin has worked his magic on Trump. I mean, who only knows what Putin said to Donald Trump in The Beast while they were driving privately together? Who only knows what else was in the envelope that was passed from the First Lady Melania Trump to Putin via Donald Trump? Sure, they showed us supposedly what was in there, a kind request to spare the lives of Ukrainian children, but there could have been other documents in there. This is the problem with Donald Trump. You just don't know what you're dealing with. He is completely untrustworthy, and Putin knows that. And the other thing I'm sure that Trump doesn't realize is that Putin is completely fluent in English. And so despite them having a translator for these kind of more public events, Putin is undoubtedly able to communicate with Donald Trump. Putin is a highly trained killer and former KGB agent. For the American security services to allow them to ride together alone in the back of the beast is just insane and does nothing to calm the fears of European leaders who know that Trump is open to manipulation. Now they have to have this second meeting with Zelenskyy. I mean, they could have had a first meeting with Zelenskyy and Putin, but, that was not the case because Trump didn't want to be upstaged by Volodymyr Zelenskyy. So Trump just meets with Putin, and now the European leaders have to jump into this meeting, which was not, Trump didn't invite all the European leaders to the White House. They came to protect the sovereignty of Ukraine. And after the debacle last time, when Zelenskyy basically got ambushed by the vice president and then the president in the Oval Office, they were there knowing that that could not happen again. So they came to lend their support. But from what we've seen from the coverage of this meeting around a table, nothing of substance was really agreed. Donald Trump ruled out a ceasefire in Ukraine, started saying, well, I've just solved 6 wars and we didn't need a ceasefire for any of those. None of that is true, of course, but that's Donald Trump yet again trying to get himself a Nobel Peace Prize.
The 6 or so wars that we stopped, we haven't had a ceasefire. And so I don't know that it's necessary. You can do it through the war. But I like the ceasefire from another standpoint. You immediately stop the killing.
And so even the European leaders had to be very clear to point out to Donald Trump that Russia is the aggressor and that Ukraine is the victim here. And Trump is still not using that language. Trump is still talking in riddles. He still clearly has an allegiance to Vladimir Putin and still is in this place where there'll be some concessions. Maybe Ukraine will get some of what they want, but Russia will also get what they want. And that's not how to do diplomacy. That is not what's going on here. A country was invaded, and the aggressor simply has to stop.
And the fact that you have said, I'm willing to participate in the security guarantees is a big step. It's really a breakthrough, and it makes all the difference. So also thank you for that.
But some of the European leaders fortunately refused to accept defeat on the ceasefire issue, saying that, the lack of a ceasefire allows Putin more time to wage his war of aggression. And it was Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, who insisted we would all like to see a ceasefire, and he could not imagine the next meeting taking place without one. Macron, the French president, also backed the idea of a truce as a necessity, saying we all support this idea. Unfortunately for Ukraine, Trump also said out loud, we also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory.
We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact. That means the war zone, the war lines that are pretty obvious, very sad, actually, to look at them. and negotiating positions. President Putin, also, you have President of Ukraine, who you just met a little while ago, and we're going to try and get a three-party meeting, maybe as soon as we can. And I have a feeling you and President Putin are going to work something out. Ultimately, this is a decision that can only be made by President Zelenskyy and by the people of Ukraine working also together in agreement with President Putin. And I just think that's very good things are going to come of it. So I hope we have a good meeting. And if we can have a good meeting, I'll set up a meeting with President Putin.
That's what Putin wants. That's what Putin has told him to say. And he also claimed that Putin had accepted that there would be security guarantees for Ukraine as part of a peace deal, and that the US would help guarantee Ukraine's safety. But that is provided you trust Putin. Putin is completely untrustworthy when it comes to him sticking to any kind of agreement. Meanwhile, as the meeting concludes, Russian strategic bombers were taking off for another attack on Ukraine, according to Ukrainians' Air Force. Putin knows what he's doing. He wants to take all of Ukraine. He's not interested in conditions. He's not interested in a ceasefire. He has played Donald Trump. He got everything that he wanted out of the Alaska meeting. Remember, Russia takes these images and rebroadcasts them on Russian state news networks and then kind of rewrites the narrative for the Russian people. Remember, the Russian people have been told by Putin that Zelenskyy is a Nazi and that attacking Ukraine is a way to liberate the Ukrainians from Nazi occupation. I mean, that's the language that they're using. And I doubt that Donald Trump has any understanding or idea that that is the narrative in Russia. So to get to a point where they can even start to have talks, trilateral talks, where the three individuals are in the room. I mean, Trump was saying, I don't even have to be there. I could facilitate a meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy. But everyone's like, no, you are America. You represent America. You have to take the lead in this moment. And it really exposed to me that the US is not the powerful nation that it once was. Under Donald Trump, it is a kind of bystander who seeks to benefit financially through deals that it can do. And, all of these supposed wars that Trump has ended have all been business deals, basically. So Ursula von der Leyen, representing the European Union, posted, "We are here as allies and friends for peace in Ukraine and Europe." She said this is an important moment as we continue to work on strong security guarantees for Ukraine and a lasting and durable peace. And of course, Trump's in the middle, not quite standing as close to Zelenskyy as he probably should have done. Zelensky's turned slightly away from Trump. Kind of weird positioning of these leaders, but at the end of the day, this is a game of chicken. Trump is the middleman. He talks to Vladimir Putin. Putin tells him what to do. Then he comes back to the European leaders and tells them something else completely that Putin probably didn't say. Just so he can be the center of attention and just so he can get that Nobel Peace Prize nomination.
And we're really honored you guys came over. I mean, these are the heads of major countries and respected all over Europe. And they speak for, largely, I think I should say, but pretty much for the other countries of Europe. And we will come to a resolution today, I think, on almost everything, including probably the security.
What a total waste of time for everybody and a whole lot of unnecessary jet lag. I'm Anthony Davis. You can find me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on the Weekend Show with Midas Touch.